The galaxy was vast, full of countless stars and countless species. Among them lived beings so powerful that entire planets bent to their will. These were the apex predators, creatures that stood at the very top of the food chain. Other species spoke of them in whispers, never too loudly, never too boldly, because to speak against them was to invite death. They were hunters, destroyers, and rulers of their own brutal worlds. And yet, one day, the galaxy heard something that no one could believe. The predators had made a choice. It was not about war, not about territory, and not about power. It was something stranger, something smaller, and yet far more shocking. The apex predators had placed their young, their most precious and vulnerable children, into the hands of a human. Not a warrior, not a soldier, not even one of the mighty champions the galaxy sometimes admired. Just a human. At first, it was met with laughter. In the grand halls of interstellar councils, alien diplomats nearly fell from their seats as they mocked the decision. Fragile prey, weak, soft, and small, was to guard the cubs of monsters? It was ridiculous. They have lost their minds, some said. Perhaps they wish their children dead, others whispered cruelly. Jokes spread like wildfire across the stars, and everywhere the story was told, it was told with disbelief. Yet, the predators themselves gave no answer. When questioned, when mocked, when pushed, they remained silent. Their eyes, sharp, bright, and terrifying, gave no hint of reason. They only bowed their massive heads when the human appeared. The very sight unsettled everyone. Creatures who bowed to no one were showing a kind of respect that had never been seen before. The more the galaxy watched, the more the laughter died away, replaced by unease. Something was wrong here. Something was hidden. The human, on the other hand, did not look remarkable. He, or perhaps she, for it mattered little to those watching, was calm. No shining weapons hung at their side, no armor protected their body, and no power hummed in their hands. They were just ordinary. Their expression was gentle, even soft, and when they bent down to greet the predator young, they smiled. It was the kind of smile no one expected, not here, not now, not in the presence of death. The predator cubs, tiny reflections of the great beasts they would one day become, rushed toward the human. They yipped, clawed playfully, and wagged their small tails. The human reached out, scratching behind an ear, stroking soft fur, and laughing quietly. The sound was strange, light and warm in a place so cold. Aliens stared. They had seen predator young tear apart prey animals twice their size for practice. Yet here they were, nuzzling against a fragile human as if nothing in the galaxy could harm them. One brave alien stepped forward, his voice dripping with arrogance. "This is a game, nothing more. The predators are testing us. They want us to laugh at this human so that we will fall into some trap. Watch. The cubs will remember their nature." But the cubs did not attack. They curled close, resting at the human's side. The human, without fear, leaned against the massive shape of one cub's mother as she watched quietly. And to the horror of everyone in the chamber, the predator mother allowed it. Her breathing slowed, her muscles relaxed, and her glowing eyes dimmed. The galaxy had seen these creatures tear apart armies, but now one sat calmly while a human rested against her. Whispers grew louder. Doubt spread. Why does she not strike? Why does she not kill? No answer came. The human began to speak, not loudly, not with force, but simply. They told the cubs a story, a human story, of a small village on a faraway world. The cubs tilted their heads, listening. Their tails flicked. Their eyes grew bright. They did not understand the words, not fully, but they understood the tone, the rhythm, the warmth. It was the same tone a mother might use to soothe her young, the same rhythm a parent might sing before sleep. Aliens who watched felt something strange stir within them. It was not power. It was not strength. It was something else, something softer, something older. And it unsettled them more than any weapon could. In the days that followed, tests came. Not from the predators, they had no need for tests, but from jealous species who wanted to expose the truth. One day, a venomous beast, its fangs dripping with toxins, was released into the chamber where the humans sat with the cubs. Gasps echoed across the viewing halls as the creature slithered closer. The cubs whimpered, shrinking back. The predators growled, ready to strike, but the human raised a hand. They did not run. They did not scream. They sat calmly, breathing slow, eyes steady. The beast hissed, rearing back, prepared to strike. Yet it did not. It froze, shaking, then lowered itself, backing away with sudden fear. The galaxy could not believe what it saw. The predator cubs rushed back to the human, pressing against them for safety. The beast slithered away as if fleeing from something unseen. No one understood. No one but the predators. More challenges came. Fires were lit, storms unleashed, trials of hunger and pain placed before the human. Through it all, they endured. Not with strength, not with weapons, not with claws or fangs, but with patience. With kindness. With an unyielding heart that never abandoned the cubs even when danger pressed close. The predators watched with knowing eyes. The galaxy watched with growing fear. What was it about this species? What was it about humans? They had no claws, no venom, no scales, no armor. Their bodies broke, their bones shattered, their blood spilled easily. And yet, they endured. Again and again, they endured. Finally, when the galaxy could take no more silence, they demanded an answer. Why? Why do you, the rulers of Deathworlds, trust a human with your young? The predators turned their massive heads toward the crowd. Their eyes glowed like suns, their voices thundered like storms, and yet their words were simple. Because they carry what we cannot. The crowd fell silent. No one spoke. The predators continued. We rule by strength. We survive by claw and by fang. But strength does not raise the young. Power does not protect innocence. A claw teaches fear. A fang teaches silence. But a human, the predators turned, gazing upon the fragile figure who now cradled a cub in their arms, teaches something greater. They teach hope. They teach love. They teach survival of a different kind. And for our children, we would have nothing less. The words struck like thunder. For the first time, the galaxy saw the human not as prey, not as weak, not as fragile, but as something else entirely. Something dangerous, yes, but dangerous in a way no weapon could match. Dangerous because they could endure. Dangerous because they could inspire. Dangerous because even the fiercest predators, even the monsters of the galaxy, bowed before them in respect. The humans said nothing. They only held the cubs close, smiling gently, as the predators stood tall around them. In that moment, the galaxy understood. And they whispered no more. The human arrived without fanfare, without soldiers or banners, without anything that might suggest importance. They stepped quietly into the great chamber where the predators had gathered. The air was heavy, full of tension, and eyes from 100 different species turned to watch. Some expected a giant, a warrior carved from steel, someone who looked like they could survive even a predator's strike. Instead, what they saw was ordinary. A human in simple clothing, no armor, no weapons, no trace of power. The laughter began almost instantly. A tall insectoid creature clicked its mandibles together and said, "This is their choice? This fragile thing." Another, scaled and sharp-eyed, leaned back with a cruel smile. Perhaps the predators have finally lost their minds. Or perhaps they think this is comedy. But the predators themselves did not laugh. Their massive shapes loomed in silence, their glowing eyes fixed on the human. When the human walked past them, they lowered their heads, a gesture so out of character that it silenced even the loudest mocker. Entire fleets had burned under those predators' claws, yet here they were, bowing their terrible heads for a human. The human did not flinch. They did not look left or right, did not acknowledge the laughter, did not cower at the sight of creatures who could tear them apart in an instant. They only walked calmly until they reached the young. The cubs were restless, their eyes bright, their claws still too small to do harm but sharp enough to remind everyone of what they would one day become. The human knelt down slowly, a soft smile touching their face. One of the cubs sniffed the air, growled a tiny growl, and then waddled forward. Its sharp teeth caught a glimmer of light, and several aliens leaned forward, waiting for blood. But there was none. The cub pressed its small head against the human's hand. Another cub followed, then another, until all of them crowded close, tails wagging, voices yipping in high-pitched excitement. The human laughed gently. It was not a loud laugh, not a commanding laugh. It was the kind of laugh that came from warmth, from peace. They rubbed behind one cub's ear, scratched another under the chin, and whispered soft words. The cubs leaned into the touch, their eyes closing, their small bodies trembling with joy. Around the chamber, silence grew. The laughter had stopped. The arrogance had faded. Now there was only unease. This was not how it was supposed to go. Predator young were dangerous, violent even at their smallest. They killed instinctively, without hesitation. Yet here they were, calm and playful at the feet of a fragile human. One alien, a reptilian scholar, narrowed his golden eyes. "This is trickery," he hissed. "The cubs are drugged. They are controlled." His words sounded strong, but his voice trembled. Even he could see that this was no trick. The predators had done nothing to restrain their young. No chemical fog filled the air, no hidden device hummed. The cubs were simply choosing. The predator mother watched closely, her massive body casting a shadow over both the cubs and the human. Her eyes glowed, her teeth flashed, and her claws dug into the stone floor. The crowd held its breath, waiting. With one swipe, she could destroy the human. With one bite, she could crush them. Yet when the human leaned gently against her side, she did not move. Her eyes softened, her breathing slowed, and the terrible muscles of her body relaxed. It was the first time in memory that the galaxy had seen her calm. The human spoke softly to the cubs, telling a story. None of the predators spoke the language, yet all of them listened. The cubs tilted their heads, ears twitching, as if they understood. They yipped and barked at the right moments, tails wagging, eyes shining with curiosity. It was not the words they understood, it was the tone. It was the rhythm. It was the patience. Something stirred in the chamber. It was not fear, nor was it respect. It was something that many had forgotten even existed. Something so small, so fragile, yet so powerful. It was trust. The scholars, the warlords, the diplomats, they all shifted uncomfortably. Their mocking words had turned to silence. Their confident sneers had turned to doubt. This was not what they expected. The human was not what they expected. The predators, however, said nothing. They only watched, their terrible faces unreadable, as if waiting for the galaxy itself to catch up to what they already knew. The whispers had not ended. Even after what the galaxy had seen with their own eyes, doubt lingered. Some called it a coincidence, others a trick of timing. There were still those who refused to believe that predators as mighty as these would ever lower themselves to trust a human. And so, they devised tests. If the human could not endure, the truth would be revealed. If the human failed, the predators would be shamed. The first test was simple, or so it seemed. A venomous creature, long and sleek with black scales glistening like oil, was released into the chamber. Its fangs dripped with poison strong enough to kill a giant in moments. The crowd leaned forward eagerly, whispering predictions of blood and screams. They waited to see the human run, to see them cry for help, to see them break. But the human did not run. They sat calmly on the floor beside the predator cubs. The cubs whimpered, sensing danger, pressing against the human side. The creature slithered closer, tongue flicking, eyes fixed on the fragile figure before it. The air grew thick with tension. One strike, one flash of fangs, and the human would fall. Still, the human did not move. Their breathing slowed, their eyes steady, their hand resting gently on the cubs' backs to calm them. The predator mother growled low in her throat, her massive body shifting, ready to kill the intruder. But the human raised a hand, not to strike, not to defend, but simply to signal peace. The poisonous creature paused. Its body trembled as if caught by an invisible force. It hissed, coiling back, ready to strike. Yet something stopped it. It froze, eyes locked with the human's. The silence stretched, a silence that weighed heavier with every heartbeat. Then, slowly, the creature lowered its body. Its fangs retracted, its head bowed, and it backed away, vanishing into the shadows without attack. Gasps filled the chamber. Disbelief turned to shock. The cubs barked happily, nuzzling against the human once more, safe and unhurt. The human only smiled softly and whispered something the crowd could not hear. The second test came soon after. Fire was lit around the chamber, a circle of heat and smoke meant to drive the cubs into panic. The flames danced high, the smoke burned the eyes, and the crowd waited to see if the human would flee. Yet once again, the human did not move. They crouched low, shielding the cubs with their own body, whispering calm words, their voice steady even as sparks landed on their skin. The cubs whimpered, but they did not run. They pressed closer, trusting the human's presence more than they feared the fire. When the flames finally died, the cubs were calm, unharmed, and still nestled close. The human brushed the ash from their arms as though it were nothing at all. The predators watched silently, their great heads lowering in respect. The third test was harsher still. The cubs were left without food for days, hunger gnawing at their small bodies, their instincts urging them to bite, to tear, to feed. The crowd expected the worst. Hungry predator young could not be controlled, not even by their own kind. Yet the humans stayed. They shared what little they had, piece by piece, even as their own body grew weak. They soothed the cubs, stroked their fur, and whispered words that made the young endure. When at last the food came, the cubs did not attack wildly. They ate calmly, glancing at the human as though waiting for permission. The galaxy had no words. These were no tricks. These were no illusions. Again and again, the human was tested. Again and again, they endured. The predators said nothing. They did not boast. They did not explain. They only watched, their glowing eyes heavy with meaning, as if daring the galaxy to keep asking questions they already knew the answers to. The predators gathered close, their towering forms casting shadows across the chamber. Their heavy footsteps shook the ground, their eyes burning like embers in the dim light. To most species, their presence was unbearable, too much raw power in one place, too much instinct for violence pressed into massive bodies. Yet the human stood among them without fear. The cubs ran in circles, playful and full of energy, their small paws scattering dust as they yipped and barked. And still, the predators did not move to correct them. The galaxy watched in disbelief. These were the apex hunters of entire death worlds, creatures whose instincts were so sharp they would kill anything that threatened their territory. They were built for survival. They were built to destroy. And yet, around the human, their instincts shifted. The air that once crackled with danger now softened into something that felt almost calm. The human reached out and touched one of the predators. Not a cub this time, but a full-grown beast. The crowd tensed instantly. That hand could be gone in an instant. That fragile body could be broken before anyone could blink. But nothing happened. The predator lowered its head, allowing the touch. Its skin, armored and scarred from countless battles, twitched once under the human's palm, then grew still. Its eyes closed, and it let out a slow, rumbling breath. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence of that moment felt heavier than any roar. The human then sat on the ground, legs crossed, letting the cubs climb into their lap. The cubs bit playfully at the human's sleeves, pawed at their face, and tumbled against their chest. Their sharp little teeth left marks, but the human only laughed quietly, pulling them close, showing no anger, no fear. The sound of that laugh carried through the chamber, and even though most could not understand why, it made the predators relax further. To the galaxy's horror, the great predators began to rest. Their massive bodies, tense and coiled with natural aggression, lowered to the floor. They lay around the human in a protective circle, not as hunters ready to strike but as guardians shielding something precious. The chamber that once felt like a battlefield now felt like a den. Whispers spread among the spectators. "This is wrong," one muttered. "They should not be doing this." Another shook his head. "No, this is impossible. They are creatures of instinct. Instinct does not change." Yet the proof was right before their eyes. Instinct, it seemed, could bend. One young alien officer, unable to contain himself, shouted, "This is weakness. The predators are losing their nature." His voice echoed against the stone walls, but before anyone could respond, one of the predator mothers opened her eyes. She turned her great head toward him, and the glow in her gaze silenced the chamber instantly. She did not roar. She did not lunge. She simply stared until the officer lowered his eyes in shame. The human, seemingly unaware of the tension, continued stroking the cubs. They hummed softly, a tune from a world far away, a tune no one else knew but one that soothed the young. The predator's breathing slowed again, and soon the entire chamber was filled with a strange sound, peace. It was then that the galaxy began to feel something it could not name. It was not fear, they had known fear before. It was not awe, They had felt or at armies, at weapons, at stars being torn apart. This was something different. Something that made their chests tighten and their voices fail. For the first time, they began to realize that what they were seeing was not weakness at all. It was control. Not the control of claws or venom or muscle, but of presence. A control that turned predators into guardians, a control born not of power but of patience. And as the humans sat there, surrounded by beasts who could have killed them at any moment, the galaxy finally began to wonder. Perhaps the predators had not chosen the human out of madness. Perhaps they had chosen them because they understood something no one else could. The galaxy could not stay quiet any longer. For days, they had watched in silence as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. The predators, feared by all, now moved with patience instead of fury, and it was all because of one human. The whispers had grown too loud, the unease too heavy. And so, the challenge was declared. Jealous voices rose first from the weaker species who had long lived in fear of predators. They could not accept what they were seeing. "This is a trick," one ambassador shouted across the great chamber. "The predators are staging this performance to humiliate us." Others agreed, their anger mixing with fear. They demanded that the truth be shown, that the predators prove why a human deserved such honor. The predators, vast and silent, did not argue. They only turned their glowing eyes to the human. It was not a command, not even a request, it was simply a look, as though to say, "Show them." The chamber floor was cleared. From hidden gates, warlords released creatures that even trained soldiers struggled to face. A giant scaled beast, its body covered in jagged spines, lumbered into the open space. Its roar shook the walls, and its jaws dripped with hunger. Every alien in the hall leaned forward, expecting the human to run, to hide, or to beg for help. But the human did not move. They stood quietly, watching as the predator cubs huddled behind them, trembling at the sound of the monster's roar. The human stepped forward, slowly, calmly, as though approaching a frightened animal instead of a living weapon. Each step echoed, soft but steady, until they were only a few paces from the beast. The monster snarled, lowering its head, claws gouging deep into the floor. Its breath smelled of death, its eyes burned with instinct. The crowd tensed, waiting for the strike. But it did not come. The beast hesitated. Its chest heaved, its tail lashed, but it did not leap. The human raised one hand, palm open. Their voice carried no command, only quiet assurance, soft and steady like a whisper meant for a child. The great beast froze, trembling, confused. Its roar died in its throat. And then, impossibly, it lowered its head to the floor in submission. The chamber erupted in gasps and shouts. The human turned back to the cubs, motioning them forward. With hesitant steps, the young predators approached the monster that had terrified the crowd. They sniffed, yipped, and pawed at its scales. The beast remained still, as if afraid to harm them. The challengers were furious. "This proves nothing," one of them cried, his voice sharp with fear. "Send another. Send something stronger." And so they did. Trial after trial came. A storm of fire and wind was unleashed, meant to scatter the cubs in panic. Yet the human gathered them close, shielding them with their own body, whispering calm words that stilled the chaos. When the storm passed, the cubs were safe. A test of hunger followed. Starved creatures were released, their eyes wild with need. They circled the human and the cubs, their growls echoing off the stone. But when the human stepped forward, unarmed, unflinching, the starving creatures faltered. They lowered their heads and slunk back, as though facing something they could not challenge. Every attempt to break the human failed. The challengers grew desperate, their voices shrill with panic. But the predators remained calm, watching silently, as if they had known this outcome all along. The final attempt came from a warlord, furious and reckless. He strode into the chamber himself, weapon raised, his eyes blazing with hate. "Enough of this nonsense. Let us see how the human survives me." The crowd roared in alarm, but before the human could move, the predators did. A wall of living muscle and teeth surged forward, cutting the warlord off in an instant. Their roars shook the chamber so violently that the floor cracked beneath their weight. The warlord fell back, his weapon clattering to the ground. He had nearly been torn apart for daring to raise his hand against the human. When the predators retreated, the human still stood calmly, the cubs pressed close against their legs. They had not spoken, had not moved, and yet the message was clear. The predators would not allow harm to come to them. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. The galaxy had demanded proof, and proof had been given. Not through violence, not through strength, but through something else entirely. The chamber remained heavy with silence long after the warlord had been dragged away. No one dared to laugh now. No one dared to mock. The predators had made their stance clear, and the human had endured every trial without breaking. Yet the question had only grown sharper in the minds of all who watched. What was it about this fragile being? What did the predators see that no one else could? The answer began to surface during the next trial, a trial not of teeth or fire, but of time. 4 days, the human was left with the cubs in a chamber designed to exhaust both body and spirit. The walls shifted, the light faded, the air grew heavy. Hunger gnawed at the stomach, thirst burned the throat, and sleep was broken by strange sounds that echoed endlessly through the darkness. It was meant to wear them down, to strip them of calm, to reveal the fear that all creatures carried within. But the human did not falter. They spoke softly to the cubs, telling them stories in the darkness. They sang lullabies from a world far away, songs that none in the galaxy had heard before. Their voice was not strong, not perfect, but steady, carrying a warmth that soothed the young when fear should have consumed them. The cubs, who should have grown restless and violent under such strain, instead curled against the human and slept peacefully. The galaxy watched through hidden eyes, their unease deepening with every passing hour. By the 3rd day, even the strongest among them would have been broken, yet the human still smiled. Their face was pale, their body weary, but when the cubs whimpered, they rose and comforted them without hesitation. When the doors finally opened, light spilling into the chamber, the human stepped out with the cubs walking calmly at their side. No chains, no force, no fear. Just trust. The predators lowered their heads once more. For the first time, some of the watching species began to understand. It was not strength that kept the cubs safe. It was not power or weapons. It was something quieter, something harder to measure. Patience. Kindness. The ability to endure without breaking. The human had nothing the galaxy valued, yet they possessed something it had overlooked. Whispers spread among the council. Perhaps this is why they trust them. Perhaps this is what we do not see. But others shook their heads in denial, unwilling to accept what their eyes told them. No. It must be a trick. No prey could hold such influence over predators. Yet even as they spoke, the evidence grew undeniable. The predators themselves remained silent, watching with the same calm certainty as always. They did not explain. They did not justify. They did not need to. Their choice stood unshaken, and every day the human proved why. It was in that silence that the hidden truth began to reveal itself. The galaxy had measured strength in claws and fangs, in fire and steel, in the power to destroy. But the predators, those who lived by such power, had chosen something else for their children. They had chosen a human. Because a human carried what no predator ever could. And the galaxy, for the first time, began to feel afraid not of what humans could destroy, but of what they could protect. The revelation came slowly, like a shadow spreading across the minds of those who watched. At first, it was only whispers, uncertain murmurs between alien delegates as they studied the scenes replayed before them. The human sitting quietly while cubs wrestled around them. The human lifting a small predator onto their shoulder so it could see something beyond the wall. The human refusing to eat until every cub had been fed. These moments were simple, almost ordinary, yet they carried a weight that no one could deny. Still, many refused to accept it. A reptilian diplomat hissed with disdain, declaring that such acts were meaningless, that softness was weakness dressed as virtue. A crystalline being clicked its voice, demanding proof of strength in combat, not tenderness. And yet, when their words rang out, the predators did not answer. They only continued to watch the human with that same calm stillness, as if daring anyone to challenge what had already been proven. It was during a storm trial that the truth finally struck. The predators had released their cubs and the human into an artificial environment of violent chaos. Lightning tore the sky, wind screamed like blades, and rain fell in punishing sheets. The cubs howled in fear, claws slipping on the soaked ground, their instincts pushing them to scatter. But the human did not let them. They crouched low, arms spread, calling to each cub by name with a steady voice that cut through the thunder. One by one, the young returned to them, pressing close, finding shelter not in a den, but in the arms of a fragile creature who would not abandon them. Hours passed, the storm unrelenting, yet the human never wavered. They shivered, drenched, teeth chattering, but their arms never loosened around the cubs. They endured every lash of wind, every crash of sound, every cold drop, until at last the storm faded into silence. When the sky cleared, the predators lowered their heads again. Not once had the cubs been lost. Not once had fear broken the humans' resolve. The watching council sat in silence, unable to deny what they had seen. No predator, no warrior, no guardian of flesh or steel could have done what the human had done, not because it required strength of body, but because it required strength of spirit. The kind that did not falter, even when all else screamed for surrender. The realization crept into every corner of the hall. The predators had not chosen a human in mockery, nor in error, nor in desperation. They had chosen a human because they understood something the galaxy had forgotten. That the greatest protector was not the strongest, but the one who refused to give up. For the first time, the laughter that had once filled the chamber was gone. In its place was a silence that felt heavier than any roar of war. Aliens shifted uneasily, some lowering their eyes, others staring at the human as though seeing them for the first time. And somewhere in that silence, an unspoken fear took root. If a single human could win the trust of the deadliest predators in existence, what else might humanity be capable of? The final trial came without warning. No cages, no storms, no illusions. Only a vast arena filled with silence, every eye of the galaxy fixed upon a single fragile figure standing among predators. The cubs clung to the human side, their small bodies pressed close, as if sensing what was about to unfold. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike any seen before. Massive, ancient, its hide scarred by countless battles, its roar shaking the very ground. It was no cub, no controlled trial, it was a living terror, a predator feared even by its own kind. The council gasped, some rising to their feet in protest, but the predators who had brought the human here did not move. This was their final truth. The beast charged, its claws tearing the earth, its eyes blazing with fury. Instinct screamed at the cubs to run, to scatter and hide. But before they could move, the human stepped forward. They did not raise a weapon. They did not bare their teeth or roar in defiance. They simply spread their arms wide, placing themselves between the monster and the young. Their voice rang out, steady and unyielding, echoing through the arena, "If you want them, you must go through me." The galaxy froze. The great beast skidded to a halt, its maw open, hot breath pouring over the human. Its fangs gleamed, long enough to pierce steel, yet it did not strike. Instead, it lowered its head, sniffed once, and then, against all logic, bowed. A sound rippled through the crowd. Not laughter, not disbelief, but awe. The cubs rushed forward, climbing onto the human's arms, shoulders, even their head, unafraid now, their trust absolute. The predators watching lowered themselves to the ground in unison, a gesture of respect that few had ever seen. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. The predators had not chosen a human because of strength or cunning or fearlessness. They had chosen them because of something far rarer. The courage to stand, unarmed and fragile, against a force that could destroy them in an instant, and to do it not for themselves, but for the innocent they protected. The council sat in stunned silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. All their weapons, their empires, their endless wars, none of it carried the same power as what they had witnessed. A single human had stood against death itself, and death had bowed. From that day forward, no one laughed when predators spoke of their choice. No one doubted why they had placed their young in human hands. The galaxy had seen the truth, and it could not be unseen. And deep within every watching heart, one thought lingered, quiet but unshakable. If this was what one human could do, what would happen when the galaxy faced all of them?